Hi, this is me. I'm Kylie, and this is Everyday Ambo. I'm a retired paramedic, and I've got life lessons to share. This is lesson number 5. May cause permanent damage. Have you noticed that everything seems to come with a warning these days? Excessive consumption may cause constipation, may affect your ability to operate machinery. Viewer discretion advised. Trigger warning. Your smoking may harm others. I don't know about you, but when I hear these, I think somebody thinks I'm not going to cope. I need to be told up front so I know it wasn't their fault. I do understand that some people like to be told up front because they don't like surprises, anything that might throw them off their guard. And this gives them an opportunity to back out slowly. I get it. For me, I hear these warnings more like a challenge. A part of me says, we will see about that. Paramedicine comes with a warning. It says, this may cause PTSD. This warning is often printed in fun colours and applied as a label to some quirky old-school paramedic's forehead who is being modelled around as someone to aspire to. But what is PTSD? That's what I'm going to answer. And I'm going to share how it's changed my life in ways I'd never imagined. PTSD is often referred to as a mental health condition and associated with unprocessed trauma exposure. Many believe it's an inability to cope with a traumatic event and associated with flaws of character. I know this because that's exactly what I used to believe. I also believed it wouldn't happen to me because I'm tougher than most. I believed it was about mental toughness and resilience. I was wrong. Neuroscience has revealed that PTSD is a biological condition and not a disorder at all. In fact, it's a perfectly normal stress response that we have evolved to manage trauma. I think it's similar to Afterpay, where rather than suffering the impact of your shopping expense all at one time, you can pay it off in small increments so it doesn't feel like such a big expense. Have you noticed that 5 small payments feels much cheaper than one big one? This isn't by accident. It feels cheaper in small doses and tricks our mind into believing we can afford it, so we buy more. Our minds manage trauma in a similar way by compartmentalising it and only revealing small increments when we're able to tolerate the experience and have the resources needed to process it. When we're exposed to large amounts of trauma, the compartments fill up and the contents start to leak. The problem with this is that we put the contents into the compartments without fully processing the emotions associated. And this is like parking the car in the garage and leaving it to idle. Over time, the fumes build up in the environment and the engine wears out from constant use and it stops functioning in the same way. Our mind has evolved to buffer us from the stresses of life, particularly the big ones, so that we can continue to function and go back for more. But we haven't evolved to cope with the quantity of stress that modern life presents, particularly if you are a paramedic. It's too much information and not enough processing time. Stress switches the brain between functions, from survival to everyday life mode. The brain has evolved to manage stress in short bursts and reverts back to everyday functioning, and in doing so, we've built the brain's capacity for this function. However, if we don't use the brain in this way, we can change the functionality through neuroplasticity. Brains under constant stress adapt to the environment. These changes mean we lose the capacity to use the prefrontal cortex. When we don't use the prefrontal cortex to learn and to store new memories, we also lose the connectivity to the hippocampus, where memories are stored and retrieved. What we don't use, we lose. In terms of the brain function and structures, this means a traumatic brain injury that affects the prefrontal cortex and the memory. The longer the brain is exposed to the stress response, the more damage done, and the longer and harder the recovery process as we prune off unused brain structures. We all have a pretty good idea what the memory is for, but do you know what the prefrontal cortex does? It's the decision maker, the emotional regulator, and our ability to learn from past mistakes. Sounds pretty important, right? Without it, we can't make new decisions. I found this out when I went to the deli and asked for sliced ham, and the girl asked me if I wanted it cut thick or thin, and I wasn't able to find an answer to the question. It was like I had a void in my memory and I couldn't find an answer. I have these a lot. Without the ability to regulate emotion, we lose the ability to hold back the big ones. We've all had moments where we felt like we wanted to cry or to yell and scream, and it's our prefrontal cortex that steps in and makes sure we don't. When the prefrontal cortex doesn't work, there is no holding it back and we just do it, and then we have to suffer the consequences. I cried at the deli counter. When we can't learn from past mistakes, we make the old ones on repeat. I went back to the deli section 3 times without preparing for that test, and it was more distressing each time until I was too scared to go to the shop. My brain was operating on autopilot, and I was perfectly fine under normal operations, but then when thrown a curveball or a soccer ball ham, I couldn't manage the new information because my brain wasn't functioning properly, and I was gradually losing the use of my prefrontal cortex and the hippocampus. These experiences rang serious alarm bells for me and sent me into disaster recovery mode. I've had to do a lot of work to rebuild my brain functionality, and that was done through a lot of reps at the brain gym as I wrote a book about what had happened. I learnt some interesting things as I lost the functionality of my brain. Interestingly, that there is benefits to unregulated emotion. I'm doing things I've never done and learning things I thought I would never do, forced into the change. I've never been a crier, and I never understood why some people are. Now I understand. There are social benefits to allowing others to see how we are feeling without holding it back. Expressing how we feel allows us to connect authentically with other human beings. Of course, some people don't want to be authentic and to connect and would rather we suck our feelings up because feelings are hard work. And trust me, I understand because I've done the hard work. So I think in terms of paramedicine, it's fair to say that excessive consumption does cause memory constipation and affects your ability to operate your machinery. So participation discretion is advised. The experience will trigger your emotions, and emotions may seem to cause harm to yourself and others. But emotional pain, just like physical pain, isn't going to kill you. But it does come with a warning. May remove blockages that have always held you back. And what you do with those is up to you. If you like my content, hit the like button. And if you're game enough, check out my other content. See you later.